Okay, so welcome for today's book journal review, and this is my review on Politics by David Runciman. Okay, so before I begin my talk, I want to ask you guys a simple question. Oh, it's not simple, but I think it's rather interesting. So, how to live in a world of distractions, of disturbance, and people getting disconnected? Okay, to answer that question and be mindful, that is the theme for today's video. To answer that question, I'm gonna have 3 parts, and that is also today's agenda. The first part is gonna be the overview of Politics by David Runciman to let you get a grasp on what this book is about. And next, I'm gonna propose my ideal leading style, which is Machiavellianism. And the last part is how can we understand justice in today's world of distractions. And that is the agenda for today. Okay, so for the first part, about the overview, there are 2 key things that I want you to remember. The first one, that the book only has 3 chapters within like 180 pages. So basically, it is a short book. It's not too long, it's not too lengthy. Just take your time to read. And the second thing is that the key takeaway for each chapter. So, for the first chapter, David Runciman works on the idea of politics, that is some form of power being exercised with the purpose to control either through violence or violence. And it is a process of consensus implementing and consensus building, because in the end, without consensus, then there will come coercion. So he takes the idea of consensus and coercion into the 2 situations of Syria and Denmark. While in Denmark, it is consensus limits the coercion, and on the surface, people live happily and harmoniously. If in the case of coercion limits consensus, then we have the war, we have genocide, we have what is happening in Syria in 2014. Then in chapter 2, he discussed the problem of technology making the government cumbersome, slow. But why? Why wouldn't we let the technocrats take over the government? Because what he proposes that the technocrats, they cannot act in times of need. And only government, they can give the direct policies. They can change the game, change the rule. So without parliament, without government, without policies, without tax, without lawmakers, without politicians, then we will have the economic crisis 2008 continue forever. So the last part is on justice. So basically, he discussed the problem of justice and how should we understand the concept. Okay, so why I agree with Machiavellianism. Well, in politics, we are introduced the concept of Hausian word. So basically, Thomas Hobbes, the philosopher, introduced as a state of nature. So basically, without a society, we will come back to the state of nature, and that state of nature is nothing but chaos. So in the end, we must need a decision maker, a single decision maker, and to Thomas Hobbes, that single decision maker is going to be the state or sovereignty. But the problem is that in Hausian word, I feel like it is an ideal concept because he wants to create an authority that is bottom up and top down, which means that the people, they will have the power to choose someone to represent themselves. And then that person, when they're in charge of governing, of watching over people, he is also placed under supervision of the people themselves. So basically, the job of the government is to govern people and to be governed at the same time. This is a double task, a double life. But from my experience and from my further readings on Words of Hanoi by Professor David Phúc, one thing I found out that is really interesting is that for the local officers or local administrators of Vietnamese government, they often proclaim their gratitude, the superiority of the Vietnamese Communist Party, but at the same time, when they act in terms that make the most locally. So how it is like possible? Imagine that if you are the highest authority, you may be the minister or something, and you give some policies down, but then there is a thing called meditation space that allow local authority to navigate, to readjust the policy based on their local situation. And when the local authority, they stand up for the local community, they forget the grand schedule. They forget about the grand scheme, that the higher authority has been. So that's why I don't really like the idea of Hobson's word, because it is not efficient. We are together working for the betterment, but if we are including too many voices, we are not creating diversity, we are creating chaos. So that's why I want to turn to Machiavellianism and why I agree with them. So there's a funny thing that is, I read The Prince like 4 years ago, and when I read politics, that's the guy I met, that's the guy I read, and I really like him. I like him because to his philosophy, the job of the authority, of the one who stands above everyone, one above all, of that kind of person, is to do for the betterment of the society. What he does is virtuous, but not in terms of common sense, in terms of conventionality. But what he does is considered good in terms of politics. So how is that possible? I think that to answer that question, it's pretty simple. It's basically that is the end justifies the means. It's not about the abrupt, but it's about the end. That is why I want to talk about being an effective government is to care about the end goal. Because in the end, that is what we achieve. However, to let a single ruler, a single party that does what he wants to do and proclaim that it is for the betterment of the society, is going to turn him into a dictator. Because usually, with one person holding too much power, people would associate that person with greed, with lust, for powers, for fame, for glory, for whatsoever that people can think of. But I don't think that is true, because unless we find that ideal political persona that gonna represent the entire community, but at the same time, he is enough rational that he compartmentalizes his ideas, his thoughts, and his emotions to work for the betterment, for the better future. That is no longer a simple promise of the Neverland, but it is the end that everybody is working towards to achieve that end. That is the point. But like I said, it is in the most ideal scenario that they find an autocrat that has the power to protect the people, that has the power, that has the right mind, the right decisions to make the job easier, to do the job, to carry out the job. Because in the end of the day, we all agree that the dirty has a dilemma. We don't want to get our hand dirty, and politics, it is a dirty job that all of us are involved. Politics matters. What Runciman said, it still matters. That's the way he ends his book. We cannot escape politics, we cannot run away from it, but we must admit that it appears everywhere. It is literally omniscient, it's present. Okay, so for now we got a political representative that I want to, but then what? Then what's next? That is when we have to answer the problem of justice. Because we all agree that we have all of the dirty hands dilemma, but it's for the betterment. So justice, it is the betterment of the society. But how can we understand justice? Because justice is it's no longer the simple concept, because when they were born, when this book was born, it's 2014, and that is when the concept of justice hasn't clashed with globalizations, with identity crisis, with politics of identity, politics of dignity. It doesn't have, the nationalism hasn't rise so aggressively, and the religious phenomenon. Okay, so the second thing about politics is that how to define justice in terms of today's world regarding the distractions and disturbance that we are supplied, we are provided, we are fed. So in the book of politics, he mentioned David Runciman did have a chapter on justice, but I didn't see any qualified questions. I didn't have a satisfied answer. Because when I think about our world, remember his book took the case of Syria and Denmark in 2014, and a decade has passed, and today is the world of 2024. Many things has happened. I would suspect that he wouldn't believe that why the Russia-Ukraine war happened, or why the Palestinian genocide, as well as the Gaza Strip terrible events take place in our today world. Because the last war that human has faced was the Cold War, and it ends decades ago. And I don't think that he would anticipate COVID-19. So we have the three horsemen of apocalypse with their foot on earth. How can we think about doing justice to all of them? You remember what I said, right? About the 8 billion people with 8 billion agenda? So basically, we are having our own scheme. We are disconnected rather than being hyper-connected. I just feel so bored when people just keep talking about that humans are becoming global citizens, that we are getting more and more connected as a unity. But in fact, the more we evolve, the more specialized we become. And by being specialized, we are walking down that rabbit hole, that only path that was shaped for us only. So the question is that with 8 billion people doing different 8 billion agenda, how can we find justice? I don't think that there should be a common answer for this all, because simply we are way too much different. We are no longer tribesmen with a single belief. This is not the medieval period with a single God to hold on. God is dead. Remember when Nietzsche said, right? So there's no a single belief system that we can build our life on. And that matters. That matters because I think that justice, for now, it is situational, it is contextual, and it is conditioned by geopolitics, by history, by social norms, by social events that a person of a certain time and space period can experience, which is incomprehensible for the entire people on this earth to understand. And maybe for generation, it may pose a question. So what I may do wrong at the time I was born, which was a social norm, becomes a thing to make me on the silent trial. Because I have observed so many digital witch hunt for people who have committed something that is, through the modern perspective, considered misconduct. But back in the time, it was not. It was social norms. So that is generational changes that when we adapt, we cannot abandon. We cannot blame them all. But we must accept and embrace, because everything now is contextual, is situational, and is conditional. Okay, so in chapter 3, Justice, David Runciman did mention about an inclusive political system, but from my opinion, inclusivity is a fantasy that humans are trying to achieve, which I don't really buy the story, because it is hard. And even David Runciman, he admitted that it is hard to achieve inclusivity and to conduct an inclusive political system. But I think that instead of trying to bringing more representative of different people or different cultures into the debate, there's gonna be a lot of noises and the inclusivity. But to me, that is nothing but a brave fantasy for every noises to become real voices. So I'll drop here today not to negate what the foundation that David Runciman has laid, but instead trying to propose another approach, because the word that he's foreseen, the word that he foresaw 10 years ago is a different word, because that word doesn't know COVID-19, does not know the Gaza, the Palestinian genocide, or the Russia-Ukraine war, and the Myanmar civil war. So that word is different from us, and what we need to do, we need to look from our modern context, our modern situation. And one last thing is that this is really a great book, and I hope that everyone who's watching this video is gonna go back and try to read it like 2 or 3 times. I did read this book like 1 year ago, but until now when I reread it and conduct this video journal, a lot of things change, a lot of new idea, fresh idea comes up. And I also want to say that it is really matter the problems of representative, that we think of the identity politics, the politics of dignity, and how nationalism, the birth of nations, not only triggered the sense of belonging on a national level, that attach, that glue people not to work together but against each other in the name of the country. Yeah, okay, so thank you for listening, me yapping a lot, and I think I wish to hear more of your comments or what have you learned about the book. Thank you.